Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Kia Stevens. And for those of you guys that don't know me, I'm the creator of the Father Swap blog. I'm here with my guest, Sandhya Oaks.
Hey.
And if you guys are not familiar with me, I do an interview once a month. As it relates to the Father Swap blog, it's created to help women exchange their father wounds for the love of God the Father. And when I say father wounds, I mean women who might have an ache for the love of their father because of divorce, abandonment, abuse, incarceration, drug addiction, alcoholism, death, or a physically present but emotionally absent dad. We exist to serve you, and we talk about all topics that relate directly and indirectly to the subject of an absent father. So I am excited for that reason to have Sandhya Oaks. She has an amazing story. And I know that sometimes the holiday season can kind of be difficult for some. You kind of begin to look at lack and everything that you don't have. And if that's you, I am really confident that after you hear her story, you'll be so encouraged to find things in your life to be grateful for and to find joy where you might not know that it exists. So, with that said, I said a whole bunch. But I am going to tell you a little bit more about Sandhya, and then I'm going to be quiet, uh, which is an amazing feat. Okay, so I'll give you her bio, but then I'm going to tell you how I know Sandhya because it was just a great connection. So Sandhya is AKA Sunny, and I'm sure that you will see that in the interview, but she is radiating a joy-filled, adventure-seeking, beloved child of God. She works with Crew in the Twin Cities, and if you don't know what Crew is, Crew offers spiritual guidance, resources, and programs tailored for people from all cultures in every walk of life through many diverse outreaches. And one of them happens to be on a college campus, which is where Sandhya works. She actively shares the gospel with college students and helps them to develop a lifelong passion for Christ. She has many passions, one of them being adoption, creating beautiful things. I'm not sure, you're going to have to expound on that. And then I'm not sure if this was a typo. Hiking?
Huga, not a typo.
Huga. Okay, you're going to have to enlighten me because I don't know what Huga is. Okay, sorority gals, explore new places, playful weekends, and good cups of coffee with a splash of cream. Okay, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, please help me welcome, Sandhya. It's going to be a fun interview because Sandhya is works with college students, so I got to pull out my inner hip, my inner cool.
Amazing.
Wait. I forgot to say. So, y'all know, maybe you don't know, I just got back from the Azer Collective, the brainchild of Joe Saxton. Joe, what's up if you're watching? And Sandhya was also an attendee like myself, and so I get down there, I have no car, no means to travel, so I'm very extroverted, so I jump in the car with Sandhya to go to the Holy Land restaurant, which is really good, and I hear her telling her story. And I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot that she was saying. I was like, this is painful. These are very traumatic things that she's talking about. But as she was talking, she talked about it with so much joy and so much life and so much hope. And immediately I'm saying to myself, I need to interview her.
Yep.
Interview her. And so here she is, Sandhya Oaks. I'd love for you to get us started by just telling us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kia. I feel like it's an honor to be in front of you, to be in front of whoever else is out there, and to be able to be interviewed tonight. And a little bit of my story is that I was born in India, and I was adopted when I was one from an orphanage. And I was adopted into a family here in Wisconsin, and they had 3 biological sons. And yeah, I have a pretty heartbreaking adoption story. It was very dysfunctional, a lot of conflict growing up in my home. And we were a church going family, but we never talked about a relationship with Jesus at home or anything like that. And unfortunately, my adoption was a broken adoption, meaning that when I turned 18, I was abandoned and disowned by my parents who adopted me. And it wasn't until I was in college that I found the gospel the gospel found me actually my senior year. And I ended up giving my life to the Lord. But before then and after then, there's been just a lot of processing, a lot of healing, a lot of tears, a lot of grieving, and yet a lot of hope that comes alongside of my journey and my story.
That's amazing. And I really want you to unpack just being in India and being adopted. So does that mean, do you know anything about your biological mother, your biological father, or yeah?
Yeah, yeah. So because I was 1 years old when I was adopted, I didn't really know anything or bring any awareness in to my adoption here in America. But when I was 21, I did a search for my birth parents, and I felt like I was at a good spot to be able to search out because I just wanted to know. There was a curiosity in me, and it came back from the adoption agency and from the domestic agency that it was unknown who my parents were. I was just dropped off by an unknown person, and they estimated my birthday to be about a month and 21 days old prior to when I got to the orphanage. And so I remember reading my paperwork saying that I was a desolate and that there was no, I was a desolate and nobody, I didn't belong to anyone. And then
How did that hit you? How that, because that's hitting me some kind of way when I hear
yeah,
desolate.
yeah. So when I first read desolate, I actually didn't know what it meant exactly. I kind of did. And so I looked it up and it was pretty stark. It was very like to be found without a belonging, to be found without a family. And I was like, well, it's true. And it wasn't right away that it fell upon me as heavy as it did, but eventually it did. And I was like, what does that mean that I was a desolate? And it meant that I wasn't in a family. Fast forward to going back to India. I went back to India a couple years ago, just through a chain of events of finding my orphanage through KP Ohanan, who founded Gospel for Asia. He came and spoke at a conference. I gave him some information about my orphanage because I couldn't find it all. And he sent someone to my orphanage, got me in contact with them. And then, like, within 5 months,
That's God. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just had to put that that's God in there. Okay, I'm done.
totally God, totally God. And 5.5 months later, I found myself arriving in India with my pastor's wife and going to my orphanage, meeting a couple of the women who took care of me as a baby, and just seeing where I'm from. It was incredible. It was emotional, and nothing turned up about my mom or my dad or any family members. They didn't have any more of the paperwork, but I felt like I got more of my answers and more puzzle pieces. I think about adoption being like a puzzle, and a person who's adopted has so many pieces that are missing of their puzzle. And so any piece of info they can get, or any picture or any view that they can get, it's like a new piece of their puzzle coming in to create a whole picture. And so I have pieces that are going to be missing for as long as I know. But the pieces I do have help me understand where I'm from, who I am, and so on.
That is so beautiful, Sundhya, and I just marvel at the way you are. I don't know if anybody else is marveling, but I marvel at the way you tell the story because you don't seem to be moved by the missing pieces. You know, even when you physically do a puzzle, you're kind of like, oh, I got to get all the edges. You know, I got to fill in the spaces. But you seem to have just a piece about the information that you don't have and then that you might not get.
Yeah, I would say that to be true. I feel like I didn't always have peace. For a while, there was this like hungry search that like, what about this? Or what about this? Or what if I check with this agency? Or what if I check with the international agency or whatever it would be. And so I just exhausted every resource. And I remember this guy friend of mine saying, if there's an open door, why wouldn't you go through it? And so when there were open doors, I've walked through them. And if there's been a door that's closed, then obviously God's telling me to turn around. And so there's been the tears shed, there's been the grief, there's been this sucks that I can't find this out. And when I look at other places or look at other people, it looks like their puzzles are more whole. But I think over and over, I keep resolving with the Lord, because it's ongoing, that I won't have all the pieces. And there's a grief that comes with that. And there's a brokenness that comes with that. But also there's a peace as I'm resolving it with the Lord and finding healing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's very powerful what you just said, and I think that's the place where we can get stuck, stuck in the grief, And I always say grief is cyclical, not linear. Like you're arriving at a destination and poof, don't have to grieve anymore.
Yeah,
I'm good. But it just kind of cycles, and you think you've overcome something, and it hits you in a different way, and boom, here it comes again. And I think you could just get caught up in that cycle over and over again and not know how to get out. How do you? And we got to go back to your adoptive family, but how do you get out? How do you return to hope when you find yourself stuck in grief?
Yeah. So a little bit of my grief journey, I have to be really transparent here, is that like when I came to know the Lord, when I gave my life to Jesus and surrendered and entered into a relationship with him, I thought my life was good to go, and I had Jesus. I was good to go. I was going to walk with Jesus well. And it wasn't until like a couple years later that my life kind of crumbled, and I was forced to go through the grief that I hadn't experienced as a child in the traumatic home. And so it caught me off guard, and it was a surprise. And so then after that year of grieving, I thought I was in the clear, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then, like you said, it's cyclical. And so it would come in different seasons, or it would hit me and trigger me in different ways. And so I've had to really come to terms with, it's going to come. It's definitely going to come. And just to continue to walk through it, and not just probably tie a bow on it, and not just try to push through it. Because I think my optimism and my joy, that like joyness inside of me, I think that's what pushes me forward. But sometimes I want to just sit in the high and the happy. And so I don't let myself always grieve or go there. What keeps me moving forward is that honestly, I think I'm quick to move forward. I'm quick to go to the joy. I'm not quick to sit in the grief. And so I think I have friends that are saying, like, sit in it. I'll sit in it with you. I'll be in it with you. And so let's grieve together. Or I want to hear more of your story. Tell me more about the grief. Whereas I want to run really fast and have all this done and behind me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I appreciate your honesty on that. I'm kind of like that too, a little bit, but I think life has made me more reflective and more introverted, and grief was a surprise to me as well. I was as you were talking, I think almost, in our childhood, there's something to be said about being naive and just not knowing anything. Mm-hmm. And it might even be the sovereignty of God, because if we experience the full measure of grief, like if we really understood what we were experiencing as children, I don't know if we'll be able to make it. But so we have that naivete. You have that in your childhood, and then when you become an adult, you are more aware of like, oh my God, I can't believe I lived through that.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. It's this trauma wall that goes up that's actually protective. And then when it comes down, it whoosh takes you out. But the Lord's got you,
So true, so true, so true. That's the second time I've talked about trauma today. I am not laying on a couch. My last interview, I was like, I need to lay on a couch because it feels like therapy. I'm not going today.
No.
Okay, let's talk about your adoptive parents, because that's a double whammy to experience the rejection the rejection that I can only imagine experience as an adoptive child, and then to wound that same spot. I can't imagine. I can't imagine. So share what you can share. I imagine it's sensitive.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because like an hour ago, I was just sitting at the kitchen table of a friend who had called me up and said she's been praying for me for the last couple of days. And so I went over there and I haven't seen him probably a couple of years. Um, and she just said, like, how are you really doing? And we both had tears in our eyes because, you know, it's the holidays. It's just talking about family. It's talking about loss. And so if I'm honest, like I literally, it is pretty tender to me. And I would say the fact that I say the words like I have a spiritual family, which is abundant and like many, but the fact that I don't have a mom and a dad is super hard. And I like literally told my friend, I said, no one should ever have to say that I don't have a family. No one, not whether you're a baby or whether you're 100 years old, those words should never come out. But because we live in a broken world, it is true. People don't have those things. And so for me, when I think about, I've lost two moms and I've lost two dads.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom the weight of that. Like, honestly, like I can't fathom that that is true sometimes because it's so heavy and it's such a weighty statement. And I can remember the night it was like probably like 10 years ago, probably now, or 9 years ago. And I remember crying in bed. It was right around Valentine's Day. And I remember feeling the weight of grieving my birth mom and then grieving also an adoptive mom. And it was just this cathartic, deep cry. And I didn't really know what to do except just cry. And my chest was just throbbing. And I just remember bawling because it was so painful. And I cried for hours in the dark in my room. But I know that the Lord had met me there, but it just felt heavy. And as for grieving my dad, there have been many different seasons, many different Father's Day that I've grieved the loss of a dad. And it's hard because we live in a very family like centered society, family centered culture. Family is everything. You go to Hobby Lobby, you see the signs family. You go to someone's house and you see the family wall. You go to church and you see a family. And there's no perfect family. You don't rarely do you see even a whole mom, dad, siblings, everyone together family, which is really sad, but it's everywhere. And so it's an ongoing process to know that and grieve that I don't have either of that. I don't have a mom. I don't have a dad. I don't have siblings. And so the questions that come up, I navigate with grace and tenderness because not anyone just assumes that someone doesn't have a family.
Like what questions can you?
Like tell me about your mom, or tell me your dad, or the question of what are your birth parents? Have you ever met your birth parents, or oh gosh, it must have been great being adopted. That they must love you and be so thankful for you. And I'm like,
wow.
oh. And the people, my phrase that I've kind of coined lately is, they don't know what they don't know, but I know that. And so that's been really helpful for me to remember and have compassion for people who don't know and who are curious. And so, yeah, I think the Lord's been gracious in giving me little things like that to hold on to.
Wow. I'm a little bit speechless. Can you talk about what it was like growing up? You did mention that it was dysfunctional.
Yeah. I remember at a young age, like my youngest age is like 3.5 years old, 4, of just some really dysfunctional stuff going on in my home. And it wasn't until I was in elementary school that I really started figuring out like something was wrong and it just wasn't a positive environment that I was growing up into. And then in middle school, it really hit home because there was just so much abuse that was going on, but it was all toward me, not any of my parents' biological sons. And there were things that would happen that teachers would start to ask questions like, why is this happening? Or are you okay? And my friends' parents would ask, are you okay? Are you safe? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. because I didn't think people would believe me. And I also didn't want to be that kid with a story that was really hard. And so I grew up in a really small town. And so I like things like this, like I can share this. Like I've always wanted to have long, beautiful black hair. And when I was a little girl, my mom didn't want that because she knew that I wanted it. And so it was always this opposite game of anything I wanted or desired or found hope in, she would take away. And so I remember many times during haircut time, she would just chop my hair really, really short like a boy. And people called me a boy until I was in like 8th grade. And I was like, girl, I'm fully girl. Like if you saw me, I was like, girl, all over. But I literally like just things that were just more tormenting and torture. And I don't, people ask me like, well, why did they adopt you? That's the most popular question. And I remember asking my mom that as a little girl, and she said, well, we wanted a daughter we could be proud of. And I was like, wow, like that's really hard. I don't have anything to show for myself, but I'm your daughter and I just don't understand. And it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't the problem in my house. It took me until I was 21 to realize that this wasn't my fault. But what happened, something that changed kind of my life was when I was a sophomore, right between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, someone said something on the radio that stuck with me. And that's what I think kept me alive, besides the Lord's goodness. I heard someone say, no one can make you have a bad day. And I took that and I owned it. And I was like, well, as badly as my mom wants to give me a bad day and torment me and tell me that I'm not hers, I'm the thing that lives in the basement or an it. Those are the things that I heard growing up from my family. I'm going to choose to have a good day. And so days that she would just reap at me and just be really mean, and my dad as well and other people in my home, I would choose to turn off what was going on, check into this kind of happy place and say, you know what, they can't control my emotion. So I'm going to choose to be positive and choose to be happy. And I'm going to look to the next good thing, next best thing. And so I would think about, well, I have a basketball game in 2 days. That'll be fun. Or I have a choir event next week. That should be great. Or I got invited to this birthday thing. That should be fun. And those little pieces of events and things and fun kept me going. That's literally what kept me going when I'd be bawling in the basement in this room, not even a room, in this corner of this basement, like, and wondering, like, does anybody care? Did God forget about me? Like, all of those things.
Girl, wow, that is amazing, because I'm sure that's a counseling technique that you basically taught your own self, of how to choose your thoughts and how to not allow other people's opinion of you to become your dominant thought. I don't know how you did that in that environment outside of just saying the sovereignty of God. I want to ask you, because it's something I've written about and heard other people talk about, and I experienced actually myself. Did you have any barriers trusting God and believing that He was a good father, or that He loves you unconditionally, that He's always with you? Were you like, well, if you're always with me, why didn't you come and rescue me out of this family? Did you have any of that when you accepted Christ?
Yeah, actually, that comes down to like the last piece of what brought me to accepting Christ. So I had gone on this spring break trip with crew as a non-believer because I don't even know why. I thought it was going to be a Habitat for Humanity trip. Always know your mission trips before you go, but actually maybe not in my case. And so I sat down with the staff member for about 2.5 hours and asked a ton of questions. And the last question Kyle asked me was, like, why are you so afraid to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord? And I said, honestly, how can I trust God, someone I can't see, if I can't even trust the 2 families that God has given me and aren't there? And he's like,
that's a good question.
Fair enough. And he said, well, God loves you so much that He sent Jesus to die for you, but also He loves you more than any parent could ever love their own child on this earth. And because that's what I really wanted was God's love and even a parent's love, I it kind of clicked. And when he said that, I was like, wow, like that's what I want. And so I was like, so you're telling me like he loves me, obviously, but like I can experience that. And he's like, yeah. And so that night, March 21st, 2007, I gave my life to the Lord. And it wasn't like I had like a aha moment for sure, but it was an ongoing transformation of knowing then how to live out of that love. And I would say, as far as trusting God, yeah, I would say ongoing, I have to continue to choose to trust God because sometimes I don't like how my life looks. I don't like that I don't have a family. I don't like that I have to figure out what to do for the holidays. I don't like that Mother's Day and Father's Day comes and I'm like, what do I do with this? I don't love those things. And so I continue to choose God like, he knows what he's doing. He's sovereign. He sees me. He knows me. And more than anything, he's going to take care of me because that's what I've longed for. I long for security. And that's the one thing that's hardest for me to give up to the Lord is the sense of security of, are you going to care for me? And so I have to continue to trust that Sundhya, you don't have to keep your life together. You can unravel and let yourself just unfold in God's arms. And he's got you, but it's something I have to really continue to trust him with.
And as I'm listening to you, I'm trying to see how we could go a little bit deeper with that because I'm imagining that someone is watching now or will watch in the replay that's kind of like having a difficult time trusting that God is going to come through for them. This faith walk that you are on. And for example, some things that you might be tempted to gravitate to if you don't have the stability of your parents might be alcohol, sex, eating, something that's tangible. Let's say shopping, hoarding, anything that's tangible that you can touch and you can see it, whether it's healthy or not. And I can imagine that somebody might say, well, why should I trust that God is going to be enough for me over these things that are tangible? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Actually, Jesus does not feel tangible, even though I've been in the church my whole life. But I did have a point in my life, especially this area of God fathering you.
Yeah.
God providing the nurturing that you did not receive as a child. That was kind of like, I think you can heal the sick, and I believe that you can help us raise money for this cause, but this kind of intangible felt need come into my heart. It feels like, I don't know. What would you say to someone who's wrestling with the idea of God being a father to the fatherless?
Yeah. That's a good question. Okay, I'm going to go to that question, but I want to touch on what you just said as well of going to things instead of going to God. I'm there. I'm guilty. Like totally there's fleshly desires in me. And so there are things that I turn to when
as all of us, though, Sandhya.
Yeah, totally. When I don't choose to believe that he's enough, or I forget what he did yesterday and how he provided. And today I act like I can't even find him. And I'm like, oh, wait, remember that? That's right. He did that. And so it takes a lot sometimes of just walking in step with the power of the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit reminding me, yeah, remember he provided a place to go last Christmas and he's going to do it again. And you know what? He provided the right person in the right moment last year during Mother's Day. He's going to do it again. It's this ongoing trust that I have to continue to surrender. For someone who is struggling with the idea of the father, the fatherless, and like, can you repeat that question of like exactly what you're looking for?
No, I can't because I don't know what I'm saying from like minute to minute. It's just like flying out of
I
my
love
mouth.
it.
But
I think we asked something like, what would I call someone who's struggling with seeing God as the Father? Okay, so
that's good. Good
that's
job,
good.
Sandhya.
So here's kind of what I would say is like, I can't give you a formula. I think I'm someone who wants to, like, I think there's been times where I've wanted a formula of A plus B equals C, and I can't give a formula, but I can tell you this, that yeah, if you seek and you search and you're curious and you want to know, he's going to give you a way. It might not be the way you think, it might not be
Right.
the way you're actually even hoping for, but he's going to meet you. And a couple things like that I can share is um for a while I had this longing just to be cared for. Like the things that I had lost as a kid are tremendous. And one of the things that I missed out on is being nurtured and cared for as a kiddo. And when I was as an adult, I've thought about that. I'm like, well, I never was like beholded. I never was cherished as a kid. And that bums me out. And actually, that grieves my heart and it makes me mad and it makes me sad because I deserved that as a kiddo. But I was like, well, how do I get that as an adult? Like, how do I experience that? Because I'm not going to tell my friends just to like look at me and cherish me. But I thought of this idea. God gave me this idea to Google Jesus beholding kids. And I was like, I know that sounds crazy. And so I Googled it and I looked at these pictures on Google Images of Jesus beholding kids. And I looked at the expression in Jesus's face and I just bawled. And I realized that's how he looked at me and that's how he continues to look at me. And so I have seen God show up in little ways like that, like just asking for things and him showing up. And so for me to accept that God, as the Father, has allowed really hard things in my life, but for good, um, not to turn my back on God the Father and to know that He's grieved with me. Um, Jesus has met me in many ways, and one of the ways is even getting a vision. Jesus gave me a vision of him grieving in the basement where I grew up and where a lot of the abuse happened. And I saw him grieving for me and with me. And it really brought a lot of comfort to know I wasn't alone. And so the way he's revealed himself to me shows that he cares. And
Right.
I need to continue to remember and hold on to those moments.
And I just can't help but think of all of the people that you're impacting on college campuses, and how God never wastes a hurt, how He can use you to be someone that people see as relatable, someone that understands, someone that they can confide in, probably some things that they've been holding on to for their entire lives and haven't felt like there was anybody that they could tell, that they could trust, that would believe them, because a lot of people don't process through the hurt like you have been able to do. Not to say that you're not still processing, but because you have a level of self-awareness and understanding, you can help bring healing and hope and wholeness to others. Have you seen that in your work? Oh my goodness. Well, I was supposed to ask you what you do. Tell everybody a little bit of what you do with Crew, and then just kind of talk about if you've been able to use your experiences growing up to impact others.
I can't help but like literally smile because I have countless stories to tell of what God's done through it. But a little bit first of what I do is I get the privilege of working with college students on the college campus. They're the most impressionable
Right.
age group because they're going to be tomorrow's leaders and they're going to all different occupations. And so I get to meet with students, lead Bible studies. I'm working with the Greek community at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and some other students. I get to help help students develop their walk with God, share the gospel. I get to do a little bit of speaking. I get to do a little bit of just different outreaches. And really get to walk alongside college students and help them become lifetime long laborers. And so I want them to be equipped
What does
to,
that mean, laborers?
yeah, it means being willing, being open, and being available to sharing the gospel wherever they are, wherever God calls them, and really serving the Lord for the rest of their life through word, through deed, action, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how have you used your past or how has your past, I guess, I don't want to say benefited you, but
Oh, I
I gotta
mean,
ask that question so that it doesn't
it
sound crazy.
doesn't, my story has been used so much. Like, I like many different ways. A couple different ways is there is always like I think almost every semester I serve, I meet another gal who's been adopted and either had a really great story who's still trying to process through the pieces of adoption or had a really traumatic story, stories of surviving child infanticide or stories of child being what was supposed to be an abortion but survived. Like, I can't even tell you the numerous stories. I just got a text yesterday from another staff woman in another place saying, can you meet with this, or can you connect with this freshman girl who is thinking about doing a missions project back in India? She's adopted, but wondering if it's wise for her to go back to her orphanage. And I'm like, or going back to her country. And I'm like, yeah, send me her way, please. But send her my way. And
Yeah.
like numerous girls have wounds of either dads or moms or siblings or grandparents or something that I can't help but share my story and to see my story be used. And um, like Genesis 50:21, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to save many lives. It makes so much sense that God's using the bad for good. But I also have come to recognize God doesn't need bad to show that he's good because he's just good.
Mm.
Um, yeah. And so I've been able to share my testimony in just numerous areas, whether it's high school students or college age students or with staff people. And mostly I've been able recently to share more about the grieving and the loss of a dad, loss of a mom times two, and help students process grief and loss. Even though that's not an area that I love to push into, it's been an area that I've had to push into. And so I've been able to meet and sit across the table from a student who's lost a family member and say, I'm really sorry. This is really hard. And let's talk about some of those memories. And let's talk about what are some things you can push into to walk through this time and how can God hold your hand through this?
Mm-hmm. And I love that because sometimes when people comfort after you grieved and they haven't grieved themselves, then it comes across as shallow and a little bit insensitive, but you can empathize in a way that others can't. And the other thing that I was thinking about was just in Matthew, I don't have the exact scripture. I guess it's 5. Is that where the Sermon on the Mount is? And God says, you're like, oh, no.
You thought you were going to ask me that.
You didn't tell me. I know, and I'm sorry because I shoot from the hip sometimes. But the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is saying, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." You know, and I think grief is it's not pretty, it's not comfortable, but we will be comforted. That is the promise that we have.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the practical things that you've done to heal? I know you were sharing with maybe I heard this when we were together in the Twin Cities about counseling and lots of it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's kind of funny because I kind of already had like a opinion about counseling before I decided to go through it because my parents brought me to a couple different counselors as a kid because they told me I was messed up. And they said, you need to go get counseling because you're messed up. And I was like, okay. But they made it seem like a negative thing and it was for negative reasons. And so I, by the grace of God, still chose to go to counseling as an adult, even though I had those bad experiences and have really seen God meet me. I've gone to a counselor, the same counselor I've gone to for the last 8 years. Actually, it's a male. And so that's actually been interesting to have a male speak into my life who is a Christian, who himself has had some trauma and some loss in his own story, and has walked through a lot of different things and been able to even step in the gap in helping in my counseling sessions, apologize on behalf of my dad or other men in my life. And so that's been really powerful. I've done
an ongoing counseling relationship.
Yep. It's ongoing. Yep. And so that's been going on for like 8 years, which is, I'm so thankful. And then I also did some pretty intensive work down in Miami with Wellspring Counseling. I did some EMDR, eye movement desensitization.
My last person said this. This is when I wanted to lay down on a couch.
Oh, no way.
The last interview guest, Tony Collier. So y'all watched that interview if you didn't, but she was talking about EMDR and basically describing it like your life is like a bookshelf, and that if something traumatic happens, it's like one of those books gets pushed out, and it's kind of like, here's the row, and you're going through life, and boom, you hit that book. And when you do EMDR, it's like going back to that place where the book got pushed out and you push it back in. I cannot believe this keeps coming up. Lord, are you trying to tell me something? I'm not going to do it. But no, I might do it, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. Maybe. I ended up going through a season of that and just
unpack it for us. What it is.
So what it is when you go through trauma, you kind of can get stuck in the trauma because your brain can't function to be able to absorb the memory. Your brain kind of not shuts down, but like pauses there. And then you keep living life, but there's unfinished memories that are triggered through other new experiences that are traumatic. And so, I don't have a really good example in this moment, but I'll kind of talk through. So what you do is you pull up a traumatic memory and you talk about how traumatic it is. You give it like a rating, and then you pull up the memory in a safe space with a counselor, and then they teach you a technique. Each counselor is a little bit different, but what the technique is, no matter what it is it stimulates both sides of your brain so that you can, one, be calmed, and two, you can retrieve the memory. And then every traumatic memory usually has other traumatic memories attached to it, things that you might not remember or things you might remember. And as you walk through each of those memories, you're able to do it in a calm setting and in a safe setting, and then watch the memory desensitize. So it doesn't feel hard, but it becomes a memory. So example, like in 5th grade, someone calls you a bad name at a birthday party. Oh, that hurts. And then when you're an adult, someone calls you a bad name at a birthday party. You could easily trigger back to that other memory and like feel stuck in that. Or when the memory is finished through EMDR, you're able to say, yeah, in 5th grade, someone called me a bad name at a birthday party. That was hurtful. And keep moving forward. You don't get stuck. And so when someone goes through a lot of trauma and all of a sudden something gets triggered, like that glass that's full and it gets tipped over, they all spill out. And that can create PTSD and symptoms of that. And so going back to the memories, desensitizing them. And for me, I saw Jesus show up in many of my memories and do a lot of the healing. And so I walked through memories from little on all the way up until current. And I did it in a safe spot with a counselor who's trained. And honestly, it's fast, it's effective, and there's a lot of like feelings that come through with it. But what it does is take all those unfinished memories from back here and pulls them into just memories here that aren't sensitive, so aren't going to be triggered. So they're just memories. And so it's really freeing. And then it also helps you build your self-esteem, because attached to every memory, there's usually a negative connotation about yourself, a negative thing about your image. And so that's released. And then a positive image is attached to that new memory. Like it wasn't your fault, or it wasn't what it was supposed to be or whatever. And so I've done a couple of different intensives of that as well. And then also equine therapy. I've done some work with some horses, and I don't love animals, but I tried it, and I'm bold and courageous. And equestrian therapy. So horse
Okay,
therapy.
the horses. Okay, sorry, we're not all cultured, so we just have to. I was like, I think that's a horse, but I am just not sure. Okay.
Horses are animals that are super intuitive, and so they can literally pick up what the person who is in front of them is feeling. They can mirror what's going on inside of you. And so they're really smart animals, and they're used a lot for therapy because they're also calming, and they can draw out of you things that are inside that you don't even know is there. For example, I didn't realize that when a horse was like itching its hoof with its was itching its nose with its hoof, I was like, what is, like, did I do something wrong? Am I making it uncomfortable? And my therapist who was with us said, you think it's you, don't you? And I was like, yeah. She's like, it's not you. The horse is doing something for its good, but you're acting like you're doing something wrong. How often in your life do you think that you're doing something wrong when someone's just doing something for their own benefit of itching their arm or something? And I was like, oh my goodness. And so equine therapy is really, really powerful too.
I never would have thought that.
Oh, it's amazing. Amazing.
I'm kind of winding down. I have like a few questions, just in and around God's word. I was sharing the scripture yesterday with the group. God sets the lonely in families. I mentioned earlier Psalms 27:10 about when your mother and your father forsake you, the Lord will take you up. Or maybe I didn't mention it in full. And then also just thinking about all of Psalms 139 that says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. The Lord knew me in my mother's womb. What do you have a certain connection to those scriptures, the scriptures that talk about God being a father to the fatherless and that speak about those things? Do you have a connection to those?
Yeah, I do. I do. The father to the fatherless is for sure one, especially right around Father's Day, that I'm reminded of because I don't have a dad. And so I do see God as my father. And as for mother, Psalm 139, like you knit me together in my mother's womb. Like, yes, he did. And yes, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. There is no mistake here. I'm a masterpiece. And I really do believe that. And I would say
I believe it too.
I do. Thanks to Psalm 139, I have words that are truth that no one, nor can my past deny, and I won't let it deny it, because it's right there in the book, and it's God breathed, and so I'm very much connected to those verses.
That's awesome. And I would love for you to speak to the woman who is feeling a little bit apprehensive about the holidays. Um, she's not looking forward to it. Um, you're smiling. Maybe you're fearful of experiencing the holidays without a loved one, or maybe feeling lonely. Or like you said, some of the things you mentioned, like where will I go for this holiday? I would love for you to encourage that woman.
Wow, I feel like I'm about to encourage myself, actually.
That's why I thought you were smiling. If you lived in Atlanta, girl, you could come over here and get you some collard greens and mac and cheese and cornbread. It's Sister Schubert's rolls because that's what we are having. Sister Schubert's
rolls. Love that. I would so love that. Maybe someday
you too.
So here's what I would tell her.
Oh wow.
Hang on.
Don't do it to me.
Give me one. I would tell her what I told myself in Target a little bit a while ago. I said, even if you don't know what's going to happen for the holidays, you don't know where you're going to land, but you long to be catched, you long to be just caught, create some memories for yourself. put up that tree, put up a little bit of decorations, make something, bake some cookies. If it's not for someone else or for a family experience or for your spouse or for kids, then do it for yourself and have some self-compassion and self-love, and just put that tree up. Even if you are single, or even if you're living with roommates that you don't really know that well yet, do those things and give yourself some compassion and love, and create some memories. And yeah, let those tears fly. If there's some sadness and there's some longing, I would also say, when you're sad, don't go on social media. Don't go
In
to
the
Facebook.
name of Jesus, Sundhya, do not
Don't,
go.
don't sit there and swipe, especially at night when you're most lonely, because it's going to bring up other people who are having babies, who are getting married, who are creating family experiences. And when you go to church, have some safe people that you can be like, hey, can I just sit with you this today? Or I need to be scooped up. Do you care if I tuck in with your family? Or call someone to go to church and meet you there? Because church can be one of the safest places, but also one of the most loud places of what you don't have and what you see other people have. And then also, I think this is something that's really important. Lastly, is like I don't know anyone with my story, but I know that there are people out there who don't have dads, or who don't have moms, or who don't have certain family members. And so I think, remember that your story, there's no isolation, because the Lord is always with you. But also on top of that, the enemy wants you to think that you're alone in it. And so just remember, you're not the only one in your own story. Because the enemy wants you to be isolated. And so during these holidays, just remember that there's someone else somewhere who's experiencing the exact same thing. And if not, if you don't know them, just remember that Jesus experienced this on this earth.
Right.
And find comfort in him then. And find comfort that knowing that he understands, and he's a great high priest who can sympathize with our weaknesses too. God is. And so, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for doing that. I know that it was probably not, it wasn't a question I told you about, and it probably was very difficult, but it was from the heart. Sundhya, you should be blogging. You should be writing. We are waiting on a book. We're just waiting. Oh, I don't know. You can come back. You can come back and we'll interview again and do a big to-do. Sundhya finally got that book. She got the blog, because your words are so powerful and they need to be heard. And I just feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little teary, but not today. I'm not crying. So that's how I have to do my tears. As you said earlier, that God is your father. I am not going to cry. I feel like he's really proud of you. I feel like he's really proud of you. I'm having a moment. Just the way that you have weathered adversity, the way that you have pursued wholeness and healing, and that you have not allowed your circumstances to dictate your mood or your outlook on life. You really personify Sunny. I love that. That's your name. And I just believe that God has something amazing in store for you, and for all of the tears that you have weathered and that you have cried, that my prayer is that he would heap goodness and joy and kindness and abundance on you for every place in your life where you experience lack. I've been blessed by this interview. I really have. It's been good.
Likewise.
And
Thank you.
Others have. Oh, I'm supposed to say, how can people connect with you?
Oh my gosh.
People connect with you?
So I am on Facebook, Sandhya Oaks, and you can connect to me on here. Send me a message, and I would love to hear from you and share your stories. And I'd love to share more if you have more questions. And so you can connect to me on Facebook. Or you can connect to me also through Kia. I'll say that as well. She has got my info. And so you can also connect to me through Kia, my friend and sister.
Yes, my friend and sister. You should move to Atlanta.
I actually wondered if you would say that on here. I wondered.
Did you really?
I actually wondered. I was like, she's gonna say something like that. I knew it.
Girl,
But I have no plans on moving to Atlanta.
Definitely hang with me and my crew. You're probably like, I'm going back to Minnesota.
I was just add some more crazy, girl.
Oh, you down for the crazy? Okay.
You got in my car at that conference. I don't know how much more crazy you can get. So.
That wasn't crazy. No. It's not crazy until you are living with all males. And the only estrogen you can get is at a conference or when you have a girls' night. I mean, I'm looking for estrogen. I'm on the hunt for estrogen. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I digress.
I love you.
I digress. Thank you, Sandhya, so much. And you guys, if you need resources, if this has hit your heart in just a way where you're like, oh my goodness, this has really opened me up, you can find some more encouragement on my blog, fatherswap.com. You can also find it on my YouTube channel. There's tons and tons of interviews where people are just really bearing their souls and talking about how they have weathered difficult things. So I encourage you to go there and join me next month for the last interview of the year, girl. Can you believe we're at the end of 2018? It's been crazy. But you guys join me then. Know that I love you and I'm praying for you. And if you have father wounds, I'm encouraging you to exchange your father wounds for the love of God the Father. You guys take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Jennifer's watching. Hi, Jennifer. Okay.